Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Distinguished Professorial Talk for Morten Asfeldt. I wanted to begin by providing an acknowledgement of the land on which we're gathered. This land is traditionally known as Sinisquah Sepisis, or Stony Creek. It is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples. The land on which the Augustana campus of the University of Alberta is located provided a traveling route and home to the Maskwacis, Nihiawak, Niitsitapi, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations, the Métis, and other Indigenous peoples. Their spiritual and practical relationships to the land create a rich heritage for our learning and our life as a community. So I am Shauna Wilton. I am the chair of social science, and I will be here tonight to introduce Morten to you and then to help moderate the question period following. So if you are online on the webinar, you were sent, a Google link in the what you need to know for tonight email. You can use that link to ask questions, and we will have a microphone here after the talk for people to ask questions in person as well. So thank you all for joining us to celebrate Professor Asfeldt's career at Augustana and his promotion to full professor. Morten is from the generation of Augustana professors and physical education faculty members who began as coaches and, in Morten's case, as an athletic director, and then navigated into a regular faculty position and made strong contributions in teaching, service, and research. In the process, Morten developed new courses and experiences in outdoor education. He established a distinct degree stream in outdoor education for students enrolled in phys ed and environmental studies, and he has developed an international reputation as a researcher in outdoor education. One colleague noted that Morten's dedication to developing his distinctive research profile relatively late in his academic career is an especially notable accomplishment. Central to Morten's career is the promotion and sharing of a wide variety of outdoor experiences with many Augustana students, Augustana staff, and the broader community. He continues to be an advocate for the unique educational opportunities that can be fostered by being in the outdoors, and has worked with many students to become leaders in the outdoors around the world. Most notable in Morten's teaching are his expedition courses, and these have ranged from canoeing in Alberta to dog sledding in the Arctic and collaborating with colleagues in Japan. The external reviewers for his promotion application described the amount of time he spent in the field as mind-boggling and noted that his courses demonstrate pedagogical risk-taking and innovation, and that they have evolved over time in complex and sophisticated ways to incorporate theory with doing. Although Morten's most notable impacts are in teaching, he's also developed a strong research profile with numerous book chapters, research and professional articles, workshops, and conference presentations. He was awarded a Shirk Insight Grant in 2018 with Dr. Perk Stevenson. His research focuses on the impact of outdoor education and experiential learning and was described by one of the reviewers as having a global impact. Tonight, Morten will speak on wool socks, long johns, and a toque. And as I said, afterwards we will have time for questions, so please join me in welcoming Morten.
Thanks, Shauna. That was great. Wow, there's a lot of people here. I wasn't sure what to expect. But anyway, of course, I feel like I can't start tonight until I get some wool socks on, some long johns on, and a toque, because that just seems like it was wrong. So let's get at it. So anyway, first, I got to get rid of these boots. Man, these things are hot. But you know, these are awesome boots. I got these bad boys at PV Mart. You guys know about PV Mart? PV Mart's like one of my favorite stores. And I figure if you're going to PV Mart to get supplies for teaching, odds are something good is about to happen in your classroom. So, of course, that doesn't necessarily apply to Stacy Lorenz. If you see Stacy Lorenz going to PV Mart, it probably means his hot water heater blew up for the 900th time. So, anyway. But, yeah. Sorry, McDavid. It's not your night. We need wool socks. I just got to put this down because I'm getting too old to put socks on with one hand anymore. Way better. Okay, there we go. I'm starting to feel ready. Okay, long johns, yeah. Favorite long johns they're one of my favorite teaching attires too, and this is an especially meaningful set. In fact, these were probably my favorites for way too long. Yeah, really way too long, and you know, clearly with these ones, it got to the point where, let's see, I can't do this with the mic in my hand, but yeah. Come on, work with me. Where are you? There. This was the kicker. When this happened, I guess I'm the only one who can say that my ass felt it was time for a new pair. So, here, I'm gonna wear these tonight. So anyway, here we go. Oh God, the dean's here. So is Ferguson. I don't know if I can do this in front of Ferguson. Because like, Ferguson has seen me in shorts and long johns many times, and you know what he always says? He always says, "Hey Morten, are those your legs or are you riding a chicken?" And I've told him hundreds of times that I think that's a foul joke, but he persists. So anyway, because I knew the dean would probably be here, I'm just kidding. We're good to go. Oh boy. And I was gonna try to figure out how to get rubber boots and surplus military pants and wool sweaters into the title, but it just got to be too much of a mouthful. But I gotta take this off because I'm dying of heat here. And then I gotta take my sweater off, but first I gotta tell you about the sweater. And I got this sweater in Norway, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, and my Norwegian friend said, you know, you got to get one of these sweaters, then you don't need a down jacket anymore. And I said, okay, well, that sounds good to me, and maybe Paul is going to call my bluff here, but my Norwegian friend said to me, but you can never wash that sweater because it'll ruin the natural oils, and then it'll never be as warm again. So I've never washed this sweater. And I like that because... oh boy, it smells of adventure. And every time I put it on, I know something good's about to happen. So anyway, if you want a whiff of this thing after the show, feel free to come on up. It'll be right here. Oh, look at that, a tie, not bad, eh? Shauna walks in tonight and she goes, Morten, you're wearing a tie. And I said, yeah. So anyhow, finally I got to get a toque on. This is another one of my favorite toques because it was free. And actually it wasn't quite free. It cost the ski club $50,000. But it came with a snow machine that we use for grooming. And I don't know, I don't see Jim Offram here, but Jim Offram, he was a principal. And Jim said I could have the toque. And I figure if a principal says I can have the toque, I can have the toque. So anyway, it's my favorite toque. So anyhow, I need a drink now. That was hot. Okay, here we go. Alrighty, well, you can hear this mic now. First of all, Shauna, thanks for your kind words of introduction, and thank you to the Faculty Evaluation Committee and my colleagues that I assume supported me in this promotion, or I probably wouldn't be here. So thank you to you guys, and also thanks to the external reviewers, whoever you are and wherever you are, for supporting that and for supporting me in my journey as well. And also, of course, I would never be here if there weren't students. So I want to thank all the students that have been in my classes over the years, both those students who took one class and said that's enough of this, and also those that took lots and could never get enough. And thanks to all of you who came out tonight, and thanks for those of you who joined us online. And Bob Henderson, if you joined us, I checked the Leaf score a few minutes ago, and it was 3-0. So you might want to tune out of this and watch the Leafs, because it could be a rare win. So Bob, you got permission to sign off. So anyway, a couple other thanks. Oh, this is hard. First, this guy, our son Jasper. He's right there, doing what he loves to do, fly airplanes. Our daughter Kaiser here, with a horse she exercises. Oh, I need a break. Someone tell a joke. At least might win. And Crystal, my wife. And I couldn't have done this without all you guys putting up with my comings and goings. I know that I've disrupted the rhythm of our little family and getting ready to go, and the anxiety that comes with that sometimes, and being gone, and then disrupting the rhythm you guys develop when I'm gone. Although I have a hunch that it hasn't all been bad, because Crystal has said once in a while, isn't it time for you to go on a trip again? So anyway, first a few little comments about how did I end up loving wool socks, lawn johns, and a toque. And it started a long time ago, back in Newfoundland, where we lived for a lot of years. They were good years. My older brother Henrik and my younger brother Thomas, I'm the good looking one there. And then my sister, who came to us on Christmas Day, no, Boxing Day. And she was adopted when we were in Newfoundland. And my dad was a doctor, and we lived in this little town called St. Anthony. And he worked for the Grenfell Mission. And I had the privilege, I don't know how much my brothers traveled with my dad, but I traveled a lot with him, up and down the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, visiting different nursing stations. And we would travel by float plane or helicopter or ship, whatever was required, and he would go do his doctor thing, and I'd go do whatever, go lobster fishing with the local fishermen. And my dad used to tell the story. I'm terrible at this. I'll be coming into a delivery room in one of these little nursing stations wearing rubber boots, probably a raincoat because it was Newfoundland. And the woman in labor said, "Who's that cute little boy?" And my dad looked over his shoulder and was like, "What are you doing here? This is not a place for you." I don't remember any of it at all. But anyway, here's Newfoundland, up in the little tip of Newfoundland, Newfoundland. Just a nice little place. And it was an outdoor life there. We were outside all the time. Not much else to do in Newfoundland when you live on the coast, and there's only 2,000 people. And so we had skidoos, and Jasper, you'll appreciate this. This was a monster go-fast machine, 12 horsepower, 1969. And so we were outside a lot. And this is where my expeditioning happened. This little pond. It's called Little Devil's Pond. I don't remember anything devilish about it, actually. It was a great little place. And we would go there. We'd fish, we'd hike around, fill our boots with water and mud, and in the winter we'd go up on Skidoo, and it felt like, I don't know, it felt like I was going to my North Pole as a 6-year-old. And you have to remember that we left Newfoundland and I had finished grade 3. And I didn't go back to Newfoundland until 2007. I took a little walk up to Little Devil's Pond. It's kind of disappointing that it only took me 12 minutes. But anyway, that's where it all started for me. And that was, yeah, I never could have looked ahead to now. But wool socks and long johns and a toque were good back then, just like they are now. And then we moved to Whitehorse, which was another remote place with lots of access to rivers and lakes and mountains. And the adventuring continued. Although now we had big boy toys. And we did all kinds of crazy things with my brother and I. And got ourselves into lots of trouble. Got ourselves out of lots of trouble. And in hindsight now, I'm not sure how my mom and dad slept when their 14-year-old and their 16-year-old were out with 30-06 rifles over their shoulders trying to shoot moose and caribou, and no satellite phones, no inReaches. And I do remember shooting a moose on a Sunday night, late at night, or late just as it was getting dark. And I thought, well, I'm supposed to be home tonight. I guess I better find out how to tell my mom and dad I'm not coming home because I got work to do tomorrow. So I drove an hour to a payphone, phoned them, and drove back, and then got home the following night. But it was fun. And yeah, we did some crazy things. And that was worth building that bridge because the fishing was good that day. And actually this fellow here, Kevin Bolstad, who was with us, this is Kevin now and his wife Kathy. Kathy I met in junior high, and we played in the band together for years, and she was a year ahead of me. And actually the only reason I ever came to Augustana was because my brother was here and Kevin was here and Kathy was here, and they were my people, and I got left behind, so it was time to pick up and go from Whitehorse. But Kevin and Kathy have hosted our students in Yellowknife for years now, and that's been really fun. And then there was hunting, which was another thing that got us out in the Yukon. And you can see, well, you can't see, but I bet there was wool socks. I bet there was long johns. That's a wool toque that I bet my mom knit, and a wool sweater that I bet my mom knit. And check this out. Leather mitts with wool liners. They're not the same ones, but they're the same ones. You can get these at Peavey Mart. And also in Whitehorse, 2 family friends of ours, Jerry on the left and Harvey on the right. Learned a lot from those guys. Real privilege. And then I came here, finished grade 12. God, I didn't think I was going to cry. Oh well. And there I am. There's a giver. There's a very young Doc Larson. Check out those socks. And yeah, I was 3 credits short of graduating from grade 12 at the end of April. Giver made me a deal. He said, you need 3 credits in high school? I said, yep. He said, okay, you take my outdoor program. I'll give you 3 credits for phys ed 30. And I thought, is there any basketballs or volleyballs involved? And he said, nope. And he said, I'm in. So I did it. And you know what they say, the rest is history. And here's Doc and Giver at one of their favorite trees on one of our common adventures. And they were good partners, those two. Gib was alive and well at night. Doc was asleep by 5:30. And Doc had already eaten most of the porridge by the time Gib and I got out of bed in the morning. But this was a great tree because we used to send students off on their own. And we'd say, okay, here's where we're camping tonight. We'll meet you there. You know you're there when you get to this old scraggly tree that's got a set of moose antlers in the branches. And I always used to fear that I would give students that information and then one day they would go there and there'd be no tree and no moose antlers and they wouldn't know where the heck they were. But the last time I was there, it was still there. I'm just going to show the picture. But I got to tell you something about Giver. Impacted lots of students, that guy. And I was one of them. And for that, I'm grateful. And of course, I sat around lots of fires with him and heard all kinds of stories. And I know that some of them were true and others weren't, but they were all good. And as I started doing some recent research, well, the last 3 years, I guess, about outdoor ed in Canada, I learned something about Gib that I kind of knew, but he didn't connect the dots for me. And just a second here. Oh, don't have Kleenex. Long johns are good for lots of stuff. Oh, that's better. You know, you grew up in BC in a logging family. Oh, let's hope I'm good now. Get that out of the way. Kind of like getting out of bed on a 40 below morning. It hurts like heck, but once you're up and going, it's not so bad. And, you know, he grew up in a logging family and did an undergrad at UBC. And came to U of A in Edmonton to do a master's in the 60s. And he was all excited because he was signed up to take a course in outdoor ed before the September term started. And he got there and they played outdoor tennis and tag football and outdoor golf. And he thought, what the heck? This is unacceptable. We need to do something about this. And so he, together with a fellow by the name of Don Smith, and Don Smith was from Ontario, had grown up in the camping movement. And Ontario is a bit of a hub for sort of where outdoor ed got going in Canada. And he convinced Don Smith that it was time for a 4-credit course in outdoor education. And so Gary started, geez, I have AU PED 280. You can see how much of a homer I am. That would be whatever the designation in Edmonton is, 280 for phys ed. And it was the first 4-credit outdoor education course at the U of A. And Passmore here, this is it's a report by Passmore. He talks about the history of outdoor education, and Passmore talks about the University of Alberta being one of the first post-secondary institutions in Canada to offer 4-credit outdoor education. So about a week ago, I phoned up Harvey Scott, who was Giver's supervisor for his PhD in Edmonton. I had a good long chat with Harvey. He was also one of my professors. And I said, Harvey, is it possible that Giver was the one who created outdoor education at the University of Alberta in Edmonton in the 60s? And Harvey said, absolutely. Not only is it possible, that's the way it is. And Giver started the first outdoor ed course at U of A, and then he started 2 more. And then he came here to teach when we were at Kamloops Lutheran College in the 60s and brought those courses here. And Giver never talked about that. And I guess what sort of amazes me, in his own humble way, he was one of the pioneers in Canada for outdoor education at post-secondary institutions, and came to little old Kamloops Lutheran College, out in little old Kamloops, and carried on. And I don't think most people in Canada in the outdoor ed scene these days know that. And I wonder how many other secrets are held at Kamloops Lutheran College and Augustana University College and now Augustana faculty on impacts that go far and wide, that lots of people who work here, it's not important. What's important is the impact they had on students. And so anyway, that was kind of fun to connect those dots in the last week after Gibbs' passing. So what about tonight? Well, let's see. Oh my God, there's no way. I want to talk a little bit about outdoor education in Canada. I want to talk about a little bit about why wool socks, long johns, and a toque and I want to celebrate a few joys. I'm going to have to be brief, but hey, if you got to go, you got to go. I'm going to just share my stories. So first of all, this is a project that I did with Rebecca, who's here, and then a series of research assistants that we had, who were all fantastic. And as Shauna mentioned, this was SSHRC funded, and of course it was approved by ethics, and these are the students involved. And really what we were out to try to determine was, so what about outdoor education in Canada? What is this beast? And what are the underlying philosophies that guide it? What are the distinctive characteristics? And what are the central goals? And why do we want to ask those questions? Well, one was, I guess, to figure out, is there some sort of Canadian way or some Canadian ways of outdoor ed that set us apart from other countries in the world? And part of that was because of my sense was that Norwegians have a pretty good sense of what outdoor ed is in Norway. The people in the UK have a pretty good sense of their history, and I didn't sense we have that in Canada. So how could we shed a little light on that? So just sheer curiosity, wanting to contribute to the international conversation, maybe work towards some unified voice for outdoor education in Canada. I'm not sure if that's a realistic goal or not, but heck, gotta aim high, right? And also maybe create a springboard for enhancing outdoor ed in Canada, because I think it's a good thing, and I think there's some good things about it, and as I'll talk about a little later, I think sometimes a little misunderstood and perhaps undervalued. So what did we do? Well, first we did a series of site visits and interviews. So we visited 22 sites across Canada, from east to west and north to south, summer camps, K-12 public school programs and university programs. And we brought that data home and analyzed it, and then based on that data and systematic review that Rebecca led with our research assistants while I was out doing interviews, we created a survey that we sent out to a whole bunch of K-12 post-secondary and summer camps. I can't remember how many we sent out. We had about 300 total in return combined. And so yeah, this was the paper that summarized the qualitative outcomes of those interviews. And basically what we found was this, that the philosophies that guide outdoor education that outdoor educators were identified were sort of a philosophy of hands-on experiential learning was central to what outdoor educators are doing. That holistic integrated learning is central. That journeying through the land is central. And that religion and spirituality is central. And when I say religion and spirituality, I mean that in the broadest sense, not Lutheran or anything, but spirituality broadly. And that the goals of the programs were about building community, about personal growth, about enhancing people and place consciousness, and about employability and skill development. And the activities were really broad. I think we ended up with a list of 33 different activities that were common. I'm not going to talk much about that tonight. And we concluded that first part of the study by simply saying that, outdoor ed in Canada is grounded experiential learning in the outdoors that links academic disciplines and has the added benefit of connecting students with the land, with its people, and our past. And that's pretty well. That kind of resonated for me, and I think I think it represents what people told us through our visits across Canada. So then, we took the results of the systematic review that Rebecca led and the interviews. We created this instrument, and we sent it out to K-12 schools. We sent it out to summer camps. We sent it out to post-secondary. I'm just going to talk about the post-secondary tonight because there's no way I'm going to talk about it all. And then we've submitted a paper with a little bit of a cheeky title here. Our college and university is missing the boat. I won't tell you how I might answer that question. But here's what we found. So these results are just from post-secondary institutions. So we identified, I think, 59 post-secondary institutions that had offered at least one or more outdoor education course. and we sent these out to all of them, and we got 22 back. So you can see this is, how important. So for example, one of the questions we asked was, for example, our program is influenced by a hands-on experiential learning approach that includes content, experience, and reflection, or a holistic integrated learning approach where traditional subjects are blended, such as history, biology, phys ed. And so questions like that, and people either strongly agreed or disagreed with that. And you can see that all these philosophies were important: the hands-on experiential, the holistic, the spirituality, the self-propelled wilderness travel, the educational philosophy, which was, the philosophy of a Dewey or a Mesereau or a Kolb or some academic source, and also influential founders, which was really interesting. So that question was, our program's influenced by a founder whose visions and values continue to influence the program today. So there were a lot of those influential founders across this country that were driven by values and passion, and implemented programs that weren't necessarily easy or standard fare. And then when we asked them, okay, if you had to pick the top 2 influential philosophies, what are they? And in outdoor education in Canada, it looks like it's about hands-on experiential learning and about self-propelled wilderness travel, spending time outside on the land, having a travel experience. And then in terms of central goals, you can see that all these goals are important. Building community, personal growth, people and place consciousness, employability, and environmental stewardship. And we asked what the top 2 were. It was personal growth and employability. But you can also, so this is, 22 people or 22 programs indicating a top 2. So, big hairy deal. Who cares? What does it mean? Well, here's a few potential big hairy deals that I think we can reasonably claim from this research. One, I think it's pretty clear that outdoor ed is pretty well aligned with the goals of a liberal arts and sciences education, and also with employer needs in the 21st century. So if you look at, now the name escapes me, the Conference Board of Canada, and you look at what employers want, they want people with social and emotional skills, with creativity, with initiative. They're not looking for those other specific skills that some people suggest are more important than others. And also, I think that outdoor ed is really well positioned right now to help address some of the current world challenges. Building community, social and emotional skills, well-being, employability, relationships to the natural world, reconciliation, and privilege more generally. And I think there's some good things happening there. And then coincidentally, as Rebecca and I were writing up the paper on post-secondary, this paper came out. I had no idea this research was going on. Tom Potter, former PhD student from the U of A, and Janet Diamond, a Canadian. Both these guys are Canadian, or both these people are Canadian. And so they wrote a paper about the turbulent times of outdoor ed in the neoliberal post-secondary context. One of their recommendations was that outdoor educators need to toot their horn a little more. Makes me a little uncomfortable. But here, I'm going to toot the outdoor ed horn here in a second, right now actually, and we'll see how you respond. I think in many respects, outdoor ed's been ahead of the post-secondary pedagogical curve for decades. And experiential, hands-on, holistic, integrated learning, active learning, place-based, team-based, call it what you want, connecting theory and practice, reflection, that's all been at the heart of what outdoor educators have been doing for years, and not just outdoor educators, of course, but certainly outdoor educators. And I think about, Gibber and what he did here, and other outdoor educators that have been a part of, didn't really talk about much of this stuff. They just talked about plain old good teaching. Let's go have a good learning experience. Call it what you will. And this is a poster that was created recently by a group in Ontario called Get Kids Paddling. And they created this visual based on the research in outdoor ed and what the outcomes of outdoor ed are and all the benefits of outdoor ed. And I think that, it aligns pretty well with what our research found and points to outdoor ed having lots of value. So let me share quickly one framework that's been helpful for me in the last, this was published in 2016, and it's been really helpful. It's one of those frameworks where you read it and you go, God, this is so simple, but it resonates so well, and why didn't I think of this? Kind of like it's obvious. But anyway, Simon Beams and Mike Brown put this together, and I think it's really good. So let me share this with you. So they call this their adventurous learning model, and they talk about, bona fide adventurous learning having 4 characteristics. And they are very clear that adventurous learning is not just about outdoor ed. That's about all kinds of learning. Where that learning is authentic, where it engages students in real versus contrived experiences, where these experiences are linked to students' lives, where students have lots of agency, where they have relevant agency and meaningful agency and choices with real consequences, and where there's lots of opportunity for mastery through challenge. And that's really kind of a poke at outdoor ed, where some outdoor ed has sort of succumbed to the one-off experience where, here we'll push you through a ropes course in an afternoon and claim to have changed your lives. And well, I think that's not true. And then where there's real uncertainty about the problems that matter, and where the outcome of the adventurous learning is unknown to both the teacher and the student. So let me give you a couple of examples of, and so here what they're saying is that, in the ideal adventurous learning, you have real high levels of authenticity, agency, mastery, and uncertainty. And of course, there's no ideal situation. You never get them all lined up. And of course, they talk about the neoliberal situation in education today where there's not much authenticity or agency or mastery or uncertainty. And of course, the reality is that, you have situations where you have more of one than the other, and what you try to do is maximize as many of them as you can, and it'll never be perfect, but the more authenticity and agency and mastery and uncertainty you have, the better. And that, wavers from situation to situation. So authenticity, how might we, what does that look like in our programs, or what do I try to make it look like at least? And, this John Dewey quote here resonates for me that education is not preparation for life, but life itself. And so how do we make outdoor ed more like a life experience than a learning experience? And the more parallel we can make that, I think the more powerful it is going to be. So I think for me, that's why I like outdoor journeys. And the longer, the better. If what you have is 1 day, that's good. 2 days is better. 4 days is better. 8 days is better. 16 days is better. 32 is probably a little much. But, 20 or 25, kind of a good balance. And there I think that we can create journeys that have some more parallels to life, and they're real. They're not contrived. And you have experiences like this. And Glenn is here. Glenn remembers this experience on the Burnside River, and I can't remember if it Glenn. Yeah, Glenn and I had both been there before, lots of times. And we've always portaged around these falls, and right below this chunk of ice, there's always a really nice gravel beach. And this time we came around the corner, and there was no real gravel beach. There was 50 feet of ice. And we had to get around it. There's no other way. The only way to get to the ocean and get to the float plane is to get past this ice. That's pretty authentic, I'd say. And we did. We managed to lower all our boats and all our gear down over this ice, and I think I can say this, I doubt the people who we rented boats from are listening, and the great thing was they were rental boats, so Glenn and the students up on the top, they took one of those rental boats and crammed it in a crevasse of ice and tied a rope off to it, and that was our anchor. It worked great, and away we went. So, I mean, this is the type of experience that none of us can predict, none of us can assure is going to happen, none of us know is going to happen, and we just don't know how we're going to deal with it. But we have to. And I think that's one of the joys of expeditions, is that you get lots of these. And then another story that I've told many times, and is an experience one night at a campsite much like this. We were camped we'd come in late the night before. We were all exhausted. I remember going to bed and just like, just wanting to sleep, and waking up in the middle of the night, and there's these wolves howling. And usually if there's a wolf howling, I'm pretty quick to get out of my sleeping bag, grab my camera, and go see if I can get a shot. And that night I was like, would you guys just shut up? I need to sleep. And then I heard a student calling to me, and it's like, Morten, there's wolves in camp, there's wolves in camps. And I looked out, and it was like, sure enough, there's a bunch of big white Arctic wolves there running through camp on their way. And I was like, don't worry about it, they're not going to hurt you. And that was that. And then in the morning, we get up, and this student tells this unbelievable story of hearing the wolves and looking out the window of her tent that night, and there's a wolf sitting on its haunches right there, looking in the tent window at her. And she makes eye contact with it. And she describes the next morning of how powerful that experience was, because it was a moment of reconciliation with her father for her. And she came from a broken family, and she really blamed her father for the breakup. And because he was gone many months in the summer because he was a wolf biologist. And that's what wolf biologists do. And that was a moment when she understood what it was that drew her father away. And I know it had a lasting impact, because about 20 years later, I bumped into her in a parking lot in Edmonton. And we had a wonderful little reunion. And I said, what are you up to today? And she said, I'm just coming to pick up my dad. We're going to the football game. And I talk about that experience in this paper, if you want to read more, a more academic version of what happened there. So what about agency? And Beams and Brown talk about it. It's when students are engaged in activities that have real relevance to their lives, where they have meaningful choices, where there's intrinsic motivation, and where there's real responsibility on them. So what's an example of that? Well, here's an example. Joel knows this example. So one of the things we've done in Arctic course is we've basically said to students, we're going to go paddle a river. Which one? You pick. Of course, we have a veto, because if they want to go somewhere that's just ridiculous, it's like, no, I'm not going there. So we have vetoed a few times. But on this particular trip, Joel and his classmates, who are a little nuts, I'd say, decided we're going to paddle the Hood River. And on the Hood River, there's this waterfall, and you don't want to go over it. Let's just say that. And so you either got to go around it, or you basically have to go around it or avoid it. And so these students decided that they wanted to not just go around it and paddle down to the ocean here and get picked up by a float plane, but they wanted to go to Wilberforce Falls. And I think they were intrigued by why this was called Portage Bay. And they said, there's got to be a reason. So they decided, and this was before we left, the plan was, we're going to portage from Wilberforce to Portage Bay. Well, it's 12 kilometers, and it's not something people commonly do. But obviously with a name like Portage Bay, it's like, okay, people have done this, or someone has done this, otherwise it wouldn't have that name. So the students researched all the possibilities, and we'd heard of another group who'd portaged from down here, and we had a pilot friend who suggested that this would be a good route, and then up this way. And so anyway, when we got to Wilberforce Falls, Les Parsons was leading this trip with us, and we'd been on the river for 2 weeks, and we had a layover day, and we said to students, okay, Les and I, we're staying in camp. You guys go scout the trail, figure out where you want to portage. We'll go where you want to go. And I don't know how much more agency I can give students than that. And then off we went. And they chose a route, and we went on the route. And is it the best route? I don't know, because it's the only one we did. Maybe it was the worst one, and we don't know. But we did it, and it was great. And that was agency. And students also had another form of agency on this trip, in that, of course, I helped them plan the food, but the day before we left, they went to the grocery store on their own, and they brought the groceries home, and they packed them, and we put it in the van, and we went up there, and we flew in, and we paddled the river. And so Les and I stayed back when they were scouting the portage route, and we were rearranging our loads so that we would have few loads. And there was a couple other students there with us. And then one student says to me partway during the day, she says, hey, Morten, have you got any idea why we've got 84 bagels left? And I said, what? And she goes, yeah, we got 84 bagels in this barrel. And I'm like, wow, that makes no sense. And she goes, yeah, there's only 18 bagels on the menu. And we were supposed to eat those in the first week. So my only possible explanation is that a student put on the menu 18 bagels and then went and bought 18 half-dozen bagels. And, well, what's amazing about that is, if any of you know Les Parsons, somehow Les Parsons got us to eat 66 bagels in 24 hours. Claimed they were the perfect portage food. And then uncertainty. So I'm a bit of a Dewey fan. You know, Dewey says that we only think when we're confronted with problems. But we have to be confronted with real, relevant problems, not just random problems. And I think those problems have to be problems of the head and problems of the hands and problems of the heart. Not just problems of how do I get from A to B, or is my bear hang high enough, but what's going on with our planet? What are we doing to this place? And what's my role in that? Or who am I? And who do I want to be? And how am I getting there? What am I learning about working in this small group on this trip? And one of the models that we use to help students sort of guide in their thinking there is this model that actually was developed by Lyle Benson, who's a former Augustana student and was standing in the far left side of that picture from 1981. And of course, being a Newfoundlander, I know very well that this line that represents the water line is too far down. But I needed room for all this text, so forgive me. But below the water line is all that stuff that makes up who we are. Those attitudes and beliefs and values and wants and needs and fears and concerns and insecurities and confidences and expectations. The stuff that's tough to pin down once in a while and makes us vulnerable when we sort of reveal it. And then, you know, above the water line is how we work with people, and of course the work skills of, you know, being able to light a fire and paddle a canoe. And I think that that model does represent problems of the hand and the head and the heart and the feet. And you know, one of our goals with students is certainly to engage them in certainty in all those areas, not just the physical uncertainty of ice and portages. And in one of my current classes, where we're exploring the history and philosophy of outdoor ed and trying to use that as a foundation for students to try to figure out who are they as leaders and what do they want their educational practice to be. And you know, the only way to understand that is to understand what I like to call their educational self-skills. So what do you know about you know, adventurous learning or experiential ed or character development or the role of reflection and nature and, you know, the whole purpose. And then mastery through challenge. And really this is aimed at, you know, how we as educators need to listen and work alongside our students and co-design appropriate challenges. You know, again, give them repeated opportunities to develop mastery in whatever that learning is, whether it's, you know, analyzing literature or, you know, figuring out how the brain works, or, you know, why Don Cherry is the way he is, or, you know, why the stars are the way they are. It's not just about risk, and it's not just about threats, real or perceived. And I think it's really about building on student strengths and interests, and about more success and failure. And I think that mastery is really the outcome of repeated, sequenced, achievable challenges over and over and over again. So going from this to, I got it, no problem. Or, you know, giving a challenge that, yeah, might challenge them and they might sort of be a little bit wide-eyed, but it's something that they can accomplish, they can succeed at. Or long times working in groups. That's why 4 days is better than 2 and 8 days is better than 4 and blah, blah, blah. How do you engage them in groups for a long period of time so they can develop that skill of making decisions and of having their voice heard and expressing their concerns? And I do really think that Dewey's onto something when he says we actually don't learn from experience. We learn from thinking about or reflecting on our experience. So one of the things I think I've learned as an educator over the years is I think we sometimes assume that students are naturally reflective, and I think that's a mistake. I think the reflection is a skill that needs to be learned, just like paddling a canoe needs to be learned. And so how do we give students all kinds of opportunity to reflect in all kinds of different ways, whether it's by prose or through music or through art or through some experiences. In some ways, it's like, why did I put this in here? It doesn't follow. I put this in here because it's one of those experiences that causes you to reflect, and you almost don't need to say anything or write anything. And in the efforts of time, I won't tell you the story because it's a long one. Or sitting on the tundra and looking at a tent ring that you know is hundreds of years old, and just trying to imagine who are these people and what was their life like. Almost incomprehensible for us, but sometimes just acknowledging the incomprehensibility of it is all that is needed and all that you can ask. So I do think that education is one of those paradoxical ironies, perhaps, that it's beautiful and it's complex, and it's messy and it's really simple all at the same time. And well, I'll leave you to think about that. And I think that maybe sometimes as academics we do ourselves a disservice by getting our pedagogical and epistemological brains all tangled up in knots, and really we should just step back and say, hey, what is it that we're hoping students to learn, and what experience can I provide that might be the best way to help them learn that? And there's no one answer. So again, you know, how do we take, for me, it's really been helpful to think about these four kind of criteria and not try to have a bullseye, but just try to have, how do I maximize each the best I can every day in every situation? And for me, that has been through wool socks, long johns, and a toque and getting outside. It's not for everybody, both faculty and students, but it's the way I know best. So what are some of the joys? Well, one of the joys has simply been providing opportunities for students to expose themselves to nature. And others have been sleeping in gravel pits because that just makes sense, and you just ran out of, you just drove 13 hours so you can't drive anymore, so we're sleeping here. Or the joy of continuous effort over extended periods of time. Or the joy of easy travel, where it's just like you got life by the tail. And the joy of living in community and sharing food and sharing stories and sharing laughter. And I do believe that education is as much a social process as it is a cognitive process, and certainly one of the benefits of getting students together with wool socks, long johns, and a toque is odds are you're going to have a pretty good social time. And also where students don't need to work together because that's what you want them to do, but they need to work together and cooperate because that's the only way it's going to happen. So do it. And of course the sheer joy of just being out and having a joyful experience. And of course celebrating all their successes, big and small, routine and unusual. There, Callum and Dawson. Sorry. You recognize that, Callum and Dawson? That's our friend Doug. That's a shovel we call Doug. And there's only one thing happening when a student takes Doug and goes for a walk. And then another joy has been, you know, giving students the opportunity to hear about other people's view of the world and how their life is different than our own. And of course then just sitting on hillsides and watching the caribou and just marveling at how does that work? It's a mystery, but it's beautiful. Or the subtle and the subtle beauty and peace of so many places. And also the dramatic beauty of so many places. And the surprises. And I also think that it's important that we give students an opportunity to embarrass themselves once in a while. So here you go.
Back behind you. Yeah, there you go. This is where
sure I told Mac Grove that I'd never show that in public or tell her who was in it. But anyway, so anyway, in a nutshell, why wool socks, long johns, and a toque? Well, it's the best way I know how to create authentic experiences where students have as much agency as I can give them, and where we can have real uncertain situations and they have an opportunity to develop mastery. And it's also the best way I know how to provide students with experiences worth thinking about. And finally, I would say that, and I'll paraphrase from one of my favorite movies, The Hunt for the Wilder People, it's the best way I know to create opportunities where stuff's about to get real. And finally, I'd say that I think it's really important that we give students something to do, not necessarily something to learn. And if the things we give them to do are purposeful and meaningful, then that will result in learning, and learning will naturally come of that. So anyway, that's wool socks, long johns, and a toque. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Morten. That was wonderful. Questions. So we have a microphone that is going to go around. We'll take a few minutes for questions anyways. And if you're watching this on the webinar, you can, of course, post them through that Google form link. I'll maybe start with one from online while the rest of you process and get ready. This question is asking about your teaching. So what have you enjoyed the most and what have you enjoyed the least? And if you could give your students one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh boy, what have I enjoyed the most? That's a hard one. There's been so many things that I've enjoyed. I think the thing I've enjoyed is being in canoes and just having really great conversations with students. Or recently on a canoe trip this fall, Joel was with us, and I decided to have a layover day on a trip where I've never had a layover day. I've probably done this trip, I don't know how many times with students, and I thought we're going to have a layover day. And one of the things that was magical was we just gave students an hour in the morning to say, just go sit on the edge of the river and take your journal and just be. And students talk about how powerful that is. So certainly the joy has been just watching students have what I think have been transformative experiences, and myself having transformative experiences that have helped me, be a better person and be a better teacher, I think. And what have I not enjoyed? Well, I really don't like being cold, and I really don't like being wet. And I especially don't like being cold and wet at the same time. But at the same time, that's part of the joy. So I don't know what I haven't enjoyed. That's hard to say.
And
what's a piece of advice?
Yeah.
Try to find an excuse to wear wool socks, long johns, and a toque at least once a week. Like, get out. Go do something. And, just get out.
Questions?
Hi, Morten. Thanks for that. That was just great. One of the things that I always remember you and Gibber talking about whenever you're waxing eloquent about what you're doing was to focus on developing leadership. And I noticed in the first part, you never mentioned leadership, although I guess it's subsumed in some of those categories. Toward the end, the word leadership did come up. Was there a specific question or item on the questionnaire that focused on leadership?
No, there wasn't. So, leadership came up in the notion of personal growth, but there wasn't a specific question. And so the questions on the questionnaire, on the survey, were ones that were themes that came out in the interviews. So we wanted to try to say, okay, how well do these themes in the interview map across the outdoor ed sector across Canada? And really personal growth and building community is where leadership showed up, but it wasn't a specific what's the word? Theme. Item, yeah. Hello.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
That was wonderful. I guess I want to ask you, I have still some friends who teach outdoor ed, and it's really tough now to
Yeah.
do that. I mean, putting aside COVID.
Yeah.
And I remember the heydays. I saw that. I was in university when that started, and I was part of some of that, what we call the GEOC conferences, Global Outdoor Education. That doesn't exist anymore, does it?
I think it does.
Are there still gatherings where teachers can get together and do that?
Yes, there is in Alberta, and I think the acronym is still GEOC, and there's certainly a organization in Ontario. One of the things that comes out in outdoor education in Canada, and one of the criticism, I guess something we've been told, a number of people have said, you guys need to get together and get united. Part of it is because, we're so hopelessly scattered across the country. And, maybe one of the reasons that I get the sense that people kind of have more of a sense of what's going on in Norway and the UK is because it's a way smaller country and it's way easier to get together. Just lost my train of thought. There's still places for people to gather? Yes, but it's not, I don't know that there's a gathering in Saskatchewan. I don't know that there's one in Manitoba. Really, a lot of outdoor education programs are driven by sort of a local, passionate person, and the programs come and go with the people. They're not as stable as traditional disciplines of math and history and English that are in the curriculum, and if the math teacher leaves, well, you get another one. Outdoor ed is sometimes seen as a bit disposable that way in a number of sectors.
Well, and that's sort of what I've seen in what's now called human ecology, that, we used to have, 26 home economics teachers. Now there's maybe 6.
Yeah.
And so the whole time when we're just learning about how important transformative and experiential learning is, the whole support for that structure seems to be eroding.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you still see it. And I agree, it comes out of the individuals who will passionately carry on no matter what.
And there's those passionate individuals in all disciplines, not just outdoor ed.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about that.
Thanks. Kim or Paula has a question, but I'm going to go to an online one first.
Okay.
So this is from Kathy Bolstad in Yellowknife.
Oh boy, this is going to be a tough one.
Asking how the change in technology, the Metaverse, has affected how students are engaged in the learning experiences, both before, during, and after the expeditions.
Well, I think I just saw the term metaverse last week for the first time. I have no idea what it means.
Just technology then.
I'm not much of a technology guy, and so it's not my gift. I will say this. It has been astonishing to watch students in the last number of years when we go on a trip and we say, I literally bring out a blackened fire pot from the outdoor ed room before we go and say, okay, let's see all your keys and all your phones. And I ask them not to take them. And students are probably rightfully anxious. What am I going to do without my phone? I can't talk to mom. I can't talk to my girlfriend. I can't check the hockey scores. And it's unbelievable to see how grateful they are at the end of 4 days or 5 days or 7 days without their phone, and how much more relaxed they are. So how has it changed? I think that, technology is not all good, it's not all bad, and there's a place for it and all those sorts of things. But like most things in life, how do we find the balance and how do we make choices, intentional choices, rather than just be addicted? But certainly it's changed the way people travel in the outdoors. I think there's a generation of people in the outdoors who do way riskier things today because they believe that you can press a button and a helicopter will be here in 10 minutes. And of course, that's not reality. So that would be one answer.
Thanks. I would think, though, having a satellite phone at times does make you feel a bit better.
Yes, it does. Obviously, it would be irresponsible of me not to have a satellite phone and an inReach, but I also know that I tell Crystal and I tell the students, this satellite phone is for emergency uses. So, Crystal, I'll be back in 21 days. I'll call you when I get to Yellowknife. I'm not calling it beforehand because that just messes with the experience. It's like if we're gonna go to this place and immerse ourselves in this place, let's go and let's immerse and let's unplug. And I think it's an awesome experience. I did see Demetrius's hand.
Oh, sorry.
I'll go, and then somebody can walk this over to Demetrius. I have a question, but also an observation. The first time I learned about Camrose Lutheran College was via Gibber. And I was an undergraduate at Queen's in Ontario, talking to a friend of mine who had just come back from an outdoor ed experience at CLC with Gibber, which was life-altering for her. That was my first exposure to CLC. That would have been in 1983, maybe.
Yeah.
So just thinking about Gibber. My question for you is, you don't teach stats, and I don't take people where there are knives and fire and boats. And so I'm trying to think how to ask the question in a way you might answer. When you teach in the classroom and you're not taking students out, how do you use this model, which is very intriguing to me?
It's harder. I'll say that. And I think that, boy, I knew someone was going to ask that question. And no, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's one we need to talk about. I don't think it's as straightforward, but so let's think about it. Okay, so how do we give an authentic problem? So, you know, and I don't teach stats, so you tell me if, Morten, you're off your rocker here. But, you know, how do we give students an opportunity to learn stats about something that is interesting and relevant to their lives, rather than some random data set that just is numbers? But how do we connect it to their life? How do we give them some real choice about what and how they learn? Recognizing that there are clearly limits to that, especially when you have 270 people in your course. So again, I think like any model, we need to be careful not to idealize this model and assume that we can have high levels of all four of those things, because that's not real. And you know, I'll give you an outdoor example. On that portage, we got to where we were camping, and all of a sudden we realized, yeah, we're going to camp here, but there's a grizzly bear eating right there. Well, I didn't give students a whole lot of agency about what we were doing there. Like, okay, no, I got this, people. This is what we're doing. And then, so authenticity and agency and mastery. So I think, you know, for what strikes me with mastery is, and outdoor ed fell into this trap, you know, where we'd have our ropes course. Well, first of all, it's a contrived setting. Nowhere in life do you crawl around on wires 40 feet above the ground, you know, climbing, you know, it's contrived. It might be fun and it might be exciting, but it's not necessarily educative. So not all experiences are equal. So how do we, just lost my train of thought, authenticity, agency, mastery. So how do you give them lots of opportunity to work with those stats so that it's not just a one-off experience and, you know, over and over and over. And I think that's, you know, it's one of the dangers of having students do a course in stats here and a course in German here and a course in outdoor ed here and a course in something else here, is that they get exposure but not necessarily mastery. Now, of course, they can't develop mastery in 15 disciplines in a 4-year program. And then uncertainty, well, I guess, you know, really what uncertainty is about is engaging students in experiences where the outcome is actually genuinely unknown. You don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be. They don't know what the outcome is going to be. And an example from outdoor ed has been, you know, outdoor ed has played or used a lot of adventure games over the years. And students have been engaged in a lot of adventure games, which in some ways make adventure games kind of useless, because when you go to ask the question at the end, what did you learn from this? Students know what you want to hear. I learned teamwork. I learned communication skills. I learned to cooperate. And really, you know, as you're debriefing, it goes, BS, you didn't learn any of that. You're just giving me what I want to hear. So I don't know if that helps you.
Let's have coffee. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'd love to have coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, and from what I know about Paula's stats course, it's doing a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Morten. I didn't quite know what to expect, of course, when you started talking, but your presentation was funny, it was moving, it was reflective, it was authentic, and I got a taste of what you must be like in the classroom.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No. And that's wonderful. I was interested in all the quotes that you had from John Dewey, but I think that's a discussion that we should have at some other time, because although I enjoy his work, I also have some reservations about his pedagogy and his philosophy. Now, it takes quite a long time for somebody to get to where you are right now, to become a full professor, so you've had a long journey, and you must have reflected about this moment, about also what you've done to get here. So I'll ask you a simple question. It's not a very complex question. If you had to do this again, if you had to start from Newfoundland or from Yellowknife, would you end up here? Has this been rewarding? And you've talked a little bit about that, but reflecting about your journey, has this been rewarding? And would you do it differently?
Well, I mean, absolutely, it's been rewarding. I often say that 2 of my toughest years were grade 10, and that's not quite true. But I wasn't a great student in high school, and I struggled through my undergrad, and I even ended up on probation and at one point on my undergrad, but boy, I skied a lot that winter. And that was good too. But no, if you had asked me 25 years ago, I would never anticipate that I would have been here. What would I do different? On the one hand, nothing. On the other hand, I might try to be more strategic, maybe more political. But maybe it's my Danish Lutheran middle child that just is blunt as blunt and speaks from my heart, and that's both curse and blessing. So I don't know. I mean, I don't have any huge regrets. Kaisa gives me a hard time that I've missed too many of her birthdays because she was born near Thanksgiving. But I don't think I don't think it's really scarred her that much. I think that in spite of the challenges of this work, I think we've had a good life, and obviously there are aspects of it that drive me bananas. And I wish the struggle for money wasn't what it is. I wish the struggle for support wasn't what it was. I wished lots of things, but that's the life we live, right? So, no, in many ways, I'm really proud of what I've accomplished, and I think that the opportunity that we've given students here at Augustana, not just in outdoor ed, but in lots of ways, is really quite phenomenal. And I really am, I'm grateful for that first experience with Gibber back in 1981 that I think really changed my life. Well, I know really changed my life. And, when I came to university here, I was stunned when I had to pick a program to be in. Because I was like, I don't care what program I'm in, I just want to take outdoor ed courses. And I was in education for a while, and then I switched out of that. So I don't have any super huge regrets.
And I think we'll give the last question to Craig.
Well, actually, I am just the messenger because Les Parsons has a question and he couldn't figure out how to use his computer. So Les would like to say, I know how life-changing your outdoor leadership wilderness expeditions have significantly impacted hundreds of Camrose Lutheran College and Augustana students. We have hundreds of alumni across Canada who are now recognized leaders in many organizations and communities. So this question from Lester Polyester to Snorton Morton is, from sharing decades of leading experiential education trips alongside you and Gibber and Doc, what is your hope in the future for developing humble servant leaders, that's in quotes, through wilderness education programs in our world that is increasingly screen-based? He reads from the screen.
Well, I mean, and I don't mean this as a poke at anybody or any institution. I just would like to see more people have the opportunity to experience this. And, one of the things I'm proud of, Dimitri, is, we did, community programs here for a long time, and, in collaboration with Rotary and the local police force and with the Battle River School District, we provided really valuable opportunity for kids that normally would not get this opportunity. And I just think that, the more time that people can spend outside and slow down and take a breath and, just kind of be, the better off we're going to be. And if that's, if that's 20 minutes during your lunch hour to walk across the street and sit under a tree in Jubilee Park and just, intentionally breathe, that's a good thing. And, long expeditions is not for everybody. But I do think that being in the natural world is for everybody. And I think that we are losing that for all kinds of reasons. And, my hope for Augustana is that outdoor ed doesn't die when I leave. That's my hope. And, it may get resurrected in some different form. That's fine. But I just hope that somehow we can get people away from screens and spend more time, whether it's across the street in the park or down Stony Creek or whatever. Just get out. And, I've seen that in the students in my outdoor ed courses, and more recently in a course that I was, kind of forced into teaching because of the pandemic when I couldn't take students on expeditions, and this solo course where I just designed a series of, I think, 15 different solos that lasted from 20 minutes to 8 hours, where students just had to get outside and get away from the screen and be present and try to use all their senses to experience the natural world. And I was stunned by how impactful that was for some students. Like, I was blown away by it. So I don't know, Les, did I answer your question?
I think that was a pretty good answer. Okay, on that note, thank you very much, Morten. I'm always amazed by how much I learn at these events and how emotional they are for the speakers and the audience. So thank you again. And
Thanks,
Morten said he's happy to answer more informal questions if people want to afterwards as well.
On my mask.